All right, good evening, everybody. 5 o'clock, so I'd like to call the meeting to order. Sean Callan. Here. Julie Chetney.
Here.
Tom Chiappa.
Here.
Dave Crisafulli.
Here.
Jim McKenzie. Here. Kristen Norfleet.
Here.
And Sean Onmock.
Here.
We can still stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so first on the agenda is the floor to the public, and we do have one person signed up. Just going to read from the public session of the board meeting, that each speaker who signed up is permitted 3 minutes for their comments. Speakers may not yield remaining time to others. All comments must be directed to the board president. The board will listen to comments and input, but will not necessarily debate or discuss items. Operational matters will be directed to school administration for handling. The board is not permitted to address personnel or individual student matters in open session. The board will limit repetitive comments. That's not going to happen tonight. The board president has the authority to end the speaker's comments or to close public comment as appropriate. Any written correspondence or letters may be directed to the board clerk for distribution to the board. The board expects decorum at all times, and all speakers should state their full name. Okay, so we have Lily Allison, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Lily Allison, and I'm a junior here at OHS. Last Monday, parents of students who are enrolled in honors, AP, and college courses were emailed via Parent Square stating that the weights previously offered by Mr. Lanigan were being revoked due to timing and disadvantage to students not taking these courses. We, the students enrolled in these classes, were never informed that this change was even being deliberated. Furthermore, we were not involved in the decision that will undoubtedly cast a disadvantage onto us now. We ask why we're not communicated with in regards to this change, and why, as the main targets of this decision, did we have no warning of its implementation a week before the first grades are due. We understand why the board may lean towards more inclusivity when it comes to grades. However, as honor students, we are expected to come to every class, maintain higher grades, learn at a rapid pace with an elevated curriculum, and balance a much more extensive workload. Despite being expected to maintain this, many of us are also involved in numerous extracurriculars, sports, volunteer opportunities, etc., after we end our school day. Many people change courses to take advantage of the 7% weight they assumed they would be receiving, and now, due to the rushed and inconsiderate timing of this decision, students can no longer change their courses, and they are left to take a course without their promised weight. We are simply asking for recognition and grades that reflect the hard work we put in. Imagine that you've been promised a salary, and suddenly your employer decides to cut your wages without contacting you or even attempting to include you on that decision with no warning or time to get your plans in order. That is how we feel. We propose a higher weight on AP and college-level courses that actually count towards our rank and the honor roll, as well as a stronger urge for communication when discussing these issues. In the week we had to disassemble the rumors and confusion caused by the outstanding lack of communication, we were able to get over 120 signatures of students in every grade and class type who are in agreement with our proposal in these issues. Many of them could not attend today, as we all have a full schedule. It is about the students, for the students. Therefore, students should be involved in decisions regarding their education well in advance of the decision actually being made on our behalf. I urge you to consider the stress and confusion that was put onto us, and I encourage you to take student involvement more seriously after hearing me speak today. Thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, next on the agenda, we have our new acknowledgement and recognition section. Excuse me. This is going to be something we're going to start regularly at board meetings, kind of highlighting the great things that are going on throughout the district. So as I understand it, Matt, is there a... Great. Okay, go ahead, Matt. Okay, so congratulations. Our Paradox Yearbook won the Empire State School Press Association Awards Conference. They won the Best Overall 2023 Yearbook. It came also in second place, the Silver Award for Cover Design, and won an honorable mention for the Library Magazine as well. The Literacy Magazine as well. Congratulations to our WBUC Student TV. They have, through the Empire State School Press Association, again, they have the best representation in media. So especially shout out to Mr. Bach and his group there. Congratulations to our team who participated in the OK academic competition. They placed first. We have many members that were involved here: Cheyenne Gordon and Elena DeBasi, Nathan Carr, Margaret O'Leary, Jack Del Conte, Beatrice Rassley, Ian McKenzie, David Pearson, Michael Pastella, congratulations, Michael, and Miles Bandla. This is a county-wide award, so it's wonderful that our team plays so well within the county schools. Also, our boys cross-country team, they won the SCAC League Championship, placing first for, I understand, the first time in quite a while. So congratulations to the boys cross-country team. And also in sectionals, Danny Dunn placed first and earned himself a spot to go to the States as our first place qualifier. So congratulations to Danny and the rest of the team. We also had some excelling girls swimming, and Jocelyn Kaniski qualified for the 100-meter butterfly when she finished second in the semifinals or the finals of the sectionals. Miles Bandla and Ben Norton were accepted to the conference All-State for mixed chorus, so congratulations to them. And our Marching Buccaneers, they wrapped up their year at the Dome as they do every year, and featured on the homepage of the U.S. Band's website. It was a picture of one of our students, Grace Cyril. So high recognition to all the work that the marching band put in all year long. In Minetto, there was a family literacy night that I understand was very well attended, so thank you for everybody who participated there. And that's it. All right, thank you. Next on the agenda is Board of Education. We have one item, and this is to adopt the board goals for this academic year. So if I could have a motion for the board goals as presented, please. Thank you, David. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Kristen. Is there any discussion? Wonderful. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Wonderful.
Jim, should we just mention that these will be posted on the website, or?
So yeah, thank you, Sean. These are going to be posted on our board website, and then Dr. Kilmer will also have his annual goals posted on his website, and we will be sending out some notifications via the media talking about what we're looking forward to all year. Yes, thank you. Okay, so next up is policies. We have our second reading and approval for A, Policy 3420, non-discrimination and anti-harassment in the district, and B is Policy 6121, sexual harassment in the workplace. So if I could please have a motion for these two, for the second reading and approval.
I'll move it.
Thank you, Sean. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you, Kristen. Heard you first. Is there any discussion? Wonderful. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. Thank you to all the people on the policy committee. This is one of our heavy lifting committees, so thank you for all the work that you're doing and that I know you will continue to work on throughout the year. Next, we have our superintendent's report. Dr. Kilmer.
Well, I'm going to actually turn it over to Amanda. We have a curriculum report that we're going to provide today. But just before they begin, I just want to address, I'm grateful to Lily and to Ian, who made an appointment to come and see me and talk through their questions and concerns. We talked a lot about communication and the fact that we did not do as well as we want to do when it comes to communication for our students and our community, and that we will work together to do that better. But most importantly, I was just grateful to come to a community where students are willing to pick up the phone or email and sit down and have a conversation and engage in dialogue. So I was grateful to them, grateful for Michael, because he and I had a chance to talk as well. In addition, I had a small group of students this afternoon. And so my continue to pledge to you and to every student in this district that I'm here to have those conversations and communicate with you as they come. So again, thank you again for coming tonight. Amanda.
Good evening. Is this on? Yes. Good evening. I'm Amanda Caldwell, the Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction. I think I know all of you. However, here with me this evening are two members of the Curriculum and Instruction and Assessment Administrative Team, Karen Reeve, who is our Director of Literacy, and Jeremy Amadon, who is our Coordinator of Mathematics. And we appreciate the opportunity this evening to share with you not only an update of the work that has been done at the K-6 level in terms of progress in curriculum, instruction, and assessment development, but also the educational concepts, defining the educational concepts for you that really have driven that work. So this evening, we will define for you guaranteed and viable curriculum. That is an educational concept that really is the driving force behind the work that is being done at the K-6 level, and share with you how that has led to work around both ELA and mathematics, curriculum work, and program selection. Give you an overview of where we're headed as next steps in that curriculum and instruction work, and then also define for you standards-based grading and how a transition to standards-based grading at the K-6 level connects back to this work. And speaking of communication, how that is a better communication tool for students and families in terms of the progress that students are making academically. I didn't realize that was automated. Yeah. So to get started, we will refer back to, or really lean on a little bit, the district's mission, vision, and core beliefs. Not losing sight of our mission and our vision and our core beliefs really should be the driving force behind just about everything we do. And that is true for the curriculum work that we're doing. Specifically, the core beliefs that we believe that students need to come first, and that every student can learn and succeed at high levels. It's our responsibility, we believe, to ensure equity and create access and opportunity for all. And that's really the, when we talk about the instructional platforms that we have adopted into the district, really is about creating more equity and identifying the diverse population in our district, believing that we need to embrace our diversity and celebrate the differences that students bring to the table. Very critically is the idea that data and evidence need to inform the decisions that we make, particularly when it comes to curriculum and instruction and assessment, but while promoting creativity and innovation in the classroom. There is the science of education, and then there is the art of education that teachers bring to the classroom every day, and we want to make sure that we don't lose sight of that. So Karen Reeve is going to talk a little bit about the concept of guaranteed and viable curriculum and how that has linked to our work.
Thanks. When we're thinking about anything in curriculum and instruction, we're starting with the question of what is it that students have to know and be able to do, either by the end of a grade level or by the end of graduation. So we start with that question, and then we really come backwards to really look at like what's happening on a day-to-day basis in terms of instructional delivery in the classroom. And when we're thinking about a guaranteed and viable curriculum, we're really looking at ensuring that all of our children have the same educational experiences. So a second grader, we would expect that a second grader by the end of second grade would have a certain group of knowledge, things that they know, and then a certain number of skills, things that they are able to do. And those things align to the New York State standards and also to our assessments. So we actually have been working with the Next Generation Standards for quite some time to really prioritize our standards and the learning of our students in order to get to this idea of a guaranteed and viable curriculum. So we wanted to just sort of give you a little timeline. I came on board in April of 2022. Jeremy came on board soon after that. We really took the baton with work that had already begun in the district, and we just continued that work. The Next Gen Standards had already really started, and we took that and started working with teacher teams and admin teams to really get that work going and living in our classrooms. So we've been able to look at those Next Gen Standards and then prioritize them, and then take those prioritized standards and align them to units of study so that what we're looking at in classrooms should be consistent across the district.
Can I just chime in for
Yes.
a second, Karen? So when we talk about prioritized standards, there are far more state standards than, as written, than can possibly be taught in an academic school year. So one of the things that districts strive to do is identify the standards that are most critical for a student having exited a grade level to have acquired the knowledge and the skills, because we can't have students master or become proficient on all of the state standards. We would have children going to school until they were 25, you know, if we were to try to master all of those standards. So one of our responsibilities is to identify what are, and Karen's going to get into this in just a minute, but identifying what are the absolute necessary things that students must know before they exit a grade level, and then what are some of the supplemental or nice things to know.
So we're working predominantly with our curriculum resources of CKLA, HMH, which is for at the secondary level for ELA, and Jeremy with iReady. And those are our resources, but then we're taking those resources and making sure that what we're doing in classrooms is for the students that are sitting in front of us here in Oswego. That has led us to this discussion about really making sure that our report card grading and our communication with families is also aligned to those standards. And the discussion around standards-based grading that has come in, and Amanda's going to talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. So we do have this idea of, or this vision of how all of these units of study and the prioritized standards and the report card grading, everything really does connect, and it is designed to really make sure that our students are getting the best possible educational experience. So just in terms of this prioritizing standards, when we're looking at prioritizing, we're taking a whole list of standards from New York State, and then we're using a criteria. It's called the REAL criteria, and it stands for readiness, endurance, assessment, and leverage. So we're looking at how much does this particular knowledge or skill, how much does it make sure that you're ready for the next grade level or the next learning experience? How much does it endure, meaning how does it apply to other learning? So like if I'm doing single digit subtraction and then that leads to double digit and things like that. So how does it apply to the next learning? Assessment is like, how is it assessed on our state assessments, our Regents exams, our state exams? And then leverage, like what's the purpose of this in life? Is this something that's really, really important? And we started this work with teachers. It was great to watch them talking and really having these conversations about like, okay, so maybe this is assessed and maybe this isn't, and how do we know if this is a priority? And we use the analogy of a priority would be like a heart. You can't live without your heart. And a supplemental or a supporting standard would be like your arm, because you could actually live if you didn't have your arm. So hearing teachers talk about, is this a heart or an arm? Is this something that we absolutely have to have kids need to know? Or is this nice to know? And then we talked a lot about, this doesn't mean that we're cutting things out. Again, it means that we're prioritizing. We're giving our instructional time, our weight, our emphasis, our interventions, and what we're assessing are aligned to these prioritized standards.
So once we have identified these priority standards, that's when we really get into the units of study work. So we are looking at our programs, our iReady, our CKLA, our HMH. We're looking at them. They have a plethora of resources in there. And that's when we really start to focus in on, okay, as a district, we have prioritized these standards. So we want to make sure that we give the appropriate time to these standards. Now, for a lot of the case, these are, national products. So we want to make sure that we make them specific and we make them what we need them to be in Oswego. So that's where, once we had them prioritized, that really allows us to come up with a scope and sequence and come up with our curricular units. And so that's the process that we're in right now with iReady. Karen started that process with CKLA for K-6 last year, and they have done a great job at it. One thing I do want to point out are those double arrows coming back to the units of study. It's never done. This work is never done. We always are continuing, and we always are monitoring. We always are looking to improve upon what we have done before. So it's never a process where we just say, we're done. It's always we're coming back to it. We're looking, and we are looking at our assessments and what do we need to prioritize and what do we need to do to make sure our students are set up for success.
Sure. So iReady and CKLA. iReady is our math program that we have implemented, obviously, to teach math. And CKLA is Core Knowledge Language Arts, is a reading program that we have implemented. And one of the, I think, frequent misconceptions in education is that the program that you purchase is your curriculum. And that's not the case. The program that we purchase is a resource for teachers to use to teach students, again, our priority standards and our nice to know standards. Both of those products are research-based, and if they, as Jeremy indicated, they are national products, but they have what we call a crosswalk between their product and the New York State standards to identify where each product is meeting the needs of our students here in New York. And there is a not-for-profit group called Ed Reports. And Ed Reports is a group of educators who volunteer to assess different programs and rate them on their usability, their assessment pieces for teachers. Both of these products, so the best you can do on Ed Reports is an all-green report. In other words, you've got the green light in all areas. Both of these products are green on Ed Reports and really are backed in the science of how we should be teaching reading and in the science of how we should be teaching math. So with all of this work around prioritized standards, and getting the right programs in place, and then evaluating and modifying the programs based on our prioritized standards, the students that we have in front of us, the data that we have in front of us. One of the things that naturally then needs to fall in place is changing how we report student progress to parents. We had a superintendent's conference day a week ago, and one of the sessions that we ran was on standards-based grading 101. And one of the things that we talked about is, despite the many changes in education, we actually shared with teachers a report card. We did it incrementally from 1821, from 1921, 1971, and the report card had really not changed. If you think about your elementary report card, you probably got S's, E's, and U's in reading, writing, spelling, that kind of thing. But one of the things that we shed light on is the fact that our report card for our elementary students, and this is really not just an Oswego issue, it's universal. Our report card, except for being digitized, really had not changed either. We had some components of standards-based grading, but I say we were doing standards-based grading light, and I'll explain what I mean by that. The concept of standards-based grading really is breaking down large chunks of content into really the prioritized standards. And rather than giving a general average on how students are doing, we target specific skills on the report card, such as adding 2-digit numbers is a skill that students need, and we report specifically on that skill, as opposed to a traditional grading system that really creates a melding pot of a bunch of different scores from different activities and reports that out as student success. So we'll just talk a little bit about the difference between the two. So in a traditional grading system that most schools have in place is really students end up with an arbitrary number at the end of a period of study, either a 5-week point for a progress report or a 10-week point for the report card. And what that number represents is a combination of scores on tests, quizzes, reports, projects, sometimes class participation, and really the best analogy is probably a melding pot, and we come out with an average. But that average doesn't communicate to students or to families where a student really is excelling academically. It's not a clear communication of the knowledge and skills that have been acquired, or where the student is deficient and needs more work. So when I say that our report card was sort of standards-based light, one of the attributes of a standards-based report card is a scale that identifies on a scale of 1 to 4, how are you progressing? We had that structure, and those of you, if you had report cards from our elementary schools for your children, you got those report cards that reported a 1 through a 4. But one of the things that we were not really doing as best practice is those report cards were averaging. We're still averaging the scale of 1 to 4. So it still was not a clear communication of what the students knew and were able to do. What we are moving towards is designing a report card that has our priority standards articulated and outlined. And what teachers are working on gathering data on and reporting out is not an average of assignments, but rather how students are performing on a scale of 1 to 4 on specific skills. This is information for teachers to be able to accelerate students or to remediate with students who are not meeting those grade level benchmarks, but it's also more clear communication for families and how families can get engaged with their students academically at home because they can see either where their kids can go further or where they can also be supporting academically at home. And this is an example that we used with teachers in terms of the scale of 1 to 4. And we recently sent home a letter to elementary parents letting them know that we're working on this transition. And part of the communication that we shared is that if a student has a 1 or a 2 on their report card, it doesn't mean that they're doing poorly in school. It means that we have identified a skill. We may be in the early parts of working on developing that skill, and students haven't acquired them yet. So the language really is that this student is not yet meeting the standard, and so the example that we use is a kiddo riding a bike, right? This student is riding a bike, but only with the use of training wheels. And that's what the 1 on our report card means. The student is emerging as a learner in this skill, but it cannot work independently to achieve the skill. 2, progressing towards that standard. So the student is pedaling well and staying upright as long as they've got some teacher support. 3 is meeting the standard, the grade level standard, and the student is successfully riding the bike independently. And as our communication to families indicated, 3 is excellent grade level work. It's students who are working on grade level, which is a little bit of a shift because folks are used to seeing those 4s for students that we presume are working on grade level. But in our new shifted scale, 4 is really for students who are exceeding grade level work. And students can show that one of 2 ways. Independently in their responses to classroom assessments and prompts, students can give more information than is requested. That information may be information that draws on a grade level above, or vocabulary is more sophisticated. Or teachers who recognize that students are ready for more can assess those students for more and extended learning. So this shift in the grade reporting really is reflective of the curriculum work in our classrooms and trying to communicate to families more clearly how students are progressing around that work.
And so some of our next steps that we are looking to do are to collaborate proficient levels based on student work. So we really want to get student work together and make sure that we're uniform across the district. And when we are looking at the standard-based grading, we want to make sure that a 2 for one teacher at one school is a 2 for another teacher at another school. So we want to make sure that we are gathering some work and calibrate that throughout the district. We want to further refine our intervention system. So looking at team time and looking at AIS math time, we want to make sure that we're utilizing our resources and making sure that we are using them to the fullest extent and making sure that our students are benefiting from these. Then we want to continue to monitor. Like I said earlier, it's never a process that's done. We want to continue to monitor and make adjustments as needed, whether it be our assessments, whether it be our units of study, whether it be our prioritized standards. So we're always looking and monitoring and adjusting as needed. And then we want to continue to work with our collaborative teacher teams. I think that has been one of the most powerful things that in this whole process, we have gotten teachers together with, it's not just done in a silo, we get our teachers together, and whether it be our units of study, whether it be our prioritized standards, whether it be looking at our assessments, we always have a team of teachers. So we want to make sure we continue that practice because it's been very powerful for us in this process.
Any questions?
So the way I understood your presentation is that the elementary report cards, for instance, a first grade report card, because you're talking about the skills you want a first grader to have, is literally going to look different than a second grade report card. Do I understand that correctly?
Yeah, so this year we are in a transition. We work through the CineRec, which is the Central New York Regional Information Center, who designs our report card. What we currently have in the district really is a prefab report card that we have limited. We can only make so many adjustments to. Moving forward, we will be getting a customizable report card so that at each grade level, what we are reporting on is reflective of the priority standards. But it's important to note that the priority standards are a progression for the most part from one grade level to the next. So you're not going to see in first grade a reading skill that doesn't appear again in second grade. The second grade descriptor will be an extension of the first grade descriptor, so on and so forth. So that parents who really keep the report cards could actually see the progression.
I think you just answered my question, but can you speak to the student who does not progress at the end of a school year and they're still not meeting the standard?
So tell me more about your question. Are you asking how would the report card read, or what would be the destiny for that student?
What would be the destiny?
So there is a lot of research behind the concept that retention is really significantly more detrimental to students than having them move on to the next grade level. So our goal is always for students to move on to the next grade level, but the communication between one grade level and the next And it's part of what Jeremy spoke to in terms of needing to continue to develop our intervention piece and our AIS piece, because then that becomes the work of our interventionists at the next grade level, is to spend time during the school day closing on the gap on where students are deficient in a skill without removing students from the core classroom, because we also don't want them missing the on-grade level instruction.
Right. So I'm trying to visualize what an elementary school report card would look like. If you're saying we're grading them, the students on the prioritized areas, where is there no nice to know area? I'm just trying to understand what this looks like.
So do you mean in terms of standards?
Right.
No, we would not report out on, the things, the supplemental
Right.
things. But there will remain a separate section on the report card in terms of the behaviors and the characteristics of the learner. So one of the things that I didn't really get into about the standards-based reporting in our traditional grade reporting system is that there are a lot of behaviors that are recorded as part of a student grade in a traditional grading system, right? So for example, when a student does not complete a homework, that's a behavior, or if a student doesn't turn in a homework, that's a behavior, but we count it as a grade. In a standards-based process, we keep a separate log. It's not that we don't keep note of when students aren't doing their homework, but it is reported in a separate behavioral section so that it's not mucked up with whether or not the
S's and the E's and the I's. Is that going to be similar?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, what you will see is really the report card will become just an iteration of the prioritized standards for the grade level.
Okay. And then just one more thing, going back to that slide where you had standard-based grading and what's currently being done, the first statement you said is what most schools are doing. So are we paving a way? Like, are other schools doing this? What are they finding?
There are a significant number of schools at the elementary level who have already moved towards standards-based grading. That is becoming the norm as opposed to not. The challenge is when we get to the secondary level, as the grade weighting conversation plays in, it's very difficult at the secondary level to move to the standards-based grading, because for the purposes of transcripts and class rank, et cetera, those need to be converted to a number anyway, whether it's somewhere in the 90s, somewhere in the 80s. But the concepts around standards-based grading in terms of removing some of the things that muddy up a grade, like behaviors, like zeros for not participating. You can have an introverted student who chooses not to participate, who knows every answer on a test, but we work sort of in a deficit system in grading right now when we record those behaviors, because again, not participating is a behavior. So the concepts of standards-based grading can certainly move to the secondary level, and that is the goal. I think it's going to take more conversation around what we do numerically in terms of reporting out.
So you're saying the goal is to move to standard-based grading for our secondary levels?
I'm saying that the goal is for our secondary folks to adopt some of the philosophies behind standards-based grading. I think the other challenge in creating a standards-based grading at the secondary level is not all of the students are taking the same courses at the same time, right? And so the report card would likely be 10 or 15 pages long, right, if we tried to articulate. But what we do want to start working on with our secondary teachers is what goes into a grade. So over the course of a 10-week period of study, teachers likely will have taught anywhere from 2 to 4 units of study, right? And mixed in there is whether or not they did their homework, whether or not they completed a project, were they absent and they didn't make something up. But none of that really communicates how well students are doing. And so bringing people along to the idea that everything that we do doesn't have to be graded and getting some of those behaviors out of the report card is something that we really could do. And moving, just like we do with the elementary, to a section of the report card that has characteristics of a learner and behaviors of a learner as opposed to those landing in the averages is also something we can do. The challenge will be in changing the point system.
Okay, thank you.
There's a consortium of secondary schools that actually has developed a standard-based transcript. They're primarily private schools, but there are some public. It is a huge lift, and it's a complete change in philosophy on how you approach educating the student. Under no circumstances are we suggesting, hey, we should go down that path. That's absolutely not. But there's a lot that we can learn from that conversation about how is it that we assess students? How do we know that they've learned what it is that we've expected? And do we see consistency across the board? In all of our classrooms. So it's a good conversation for us to continue to have as we look at providing the best for our students.
On a scale of 1 to 10, in terms of implementation, where would you say we are relative to it?
I think that's not. I would say that we are progressing towards the standard. I think we have a little support going on. And I think that depends on, and I don't think that's too across the board. We have some people who are knocking it out of the park. We have teachers who have created sheets, and those sheets are labeled with the priority standards for each grade level. They have tagged assignments in CKLA and in iReady that assess those standards. So, and they are sharing those out with their colleagues. We have other folks who are still wrapping their head around moving away from, I want to give this student a 90, as opposed to articulating, but what does that 90 represent? So I think we really have a diverse, I think progress here. We did, following the superintendent's conference day, survey our K-6 teachers about what more they needed to know in terms of training so that we can better support them. One of the things that we recognize as a curriculum and instruction department is that even though we adopted CKLA years ago, the units of study work is relatively new to folks. iReady is new to folks. We're making a transition to standards-based grading, and so we want to be able to provide as much support as we can. So following the conference day, we surveyed teachers to ask what more they needed to know. We only had a couple of people who said they need to know more about standards-based grading. I think people conceptually are wrapping their head around it. I think it's just getting used to the practice of looking at a student assignment for the skill acquisition and not, I think one of the things that this identifies is traditional grading is about answers right or answers wrong, number of answers right or wrong. We're less concerned about that number and more about whether or not there are more answers right to tell us that the student has acquired the skill and is ready to move on, as opposed to the average that we end up with at the end of it.
So to follow up on Tom's question, you mentioned there's a group, a company, whomever, that puts together a report card. Right?
Yes, the CineRec. Yep.
What's the report card going to look like this quarter?
This quarter, it will look like it has traditionally. What will change, though, is that the averaging has been turned off. And so no one will be getting a 2.67 in reading, right? It will be a whole number, and that number will be reported as the teacher has gathered evidence towards that skill, as opposed to the computer doing an average for us. And I mean, I don't want to take up the whole board meeting. We could talk about this all day. And because it's about, at the end of a period of instruction, where is the student performing. So when we introduce a new skill to a student, we expect them, like any skill that we are working on as adults, to be a 1 or a 2. They don't know how to do it yet. In our traditional system, we penalize students when they are new to a skill and earning a 1 or a 2, because we end up averaging those 1 or 2s in. What we're really concerned about is at the end of the period of instruction, is the student a 3 or a 4 yet? And if not, what do we need to do to intervene? We shared with teachers a string of 10 assignments where a student earned a handful of 1s, a couple of 2s, a couple of 3s, a 4, and then another 3 or so. And we said to teachers, what grade would you give these students? And before we really started talking about standards-based grading, almost to a T, the teachers averaged them, and the average came out to 2.3. But if you look at the linear progression, at the end of the period of instruction, the student clearly was proficient because his ending grades were all 3s or 4s. And so we would have been misrepresenting to a family that a student didn't acquire that skill when really they had.
I'm sorry, I have more. So can we talk about the 4 then?
Yes.
So is it safe to say the 4 is attainable? And how are teachers supposed to be teaching above grade level? How is it, and how are teachers responding to that notion?
Can I, Amanda, and can I, mine's very similar, so
Okay.
maybe you
Yeah.
could just take care of both of them. If I have a classroom of students and I'm trying to, over that 5-week period with my priorities that I'm teaching to, and I have a big group, a majority group that's at a 2, and I'm trying to get them to a 3. You mentioned earlier that the students that are exceeding have, and you cited 2 examples. Is that enough for those students? Like when you're focused on bringing a bunch of students from a 2 to a 3 and you're working with them and to get them to show that progression, are there enough examples for are there enough opportunities for students to attain that 4?
So yes, because I think to answer both of your questions, the opportunity doesn't always have to be presented by the teacher. But Julie, to your question first, that is one of the concepts that teachers are trying to wrap their heads around. How do I offer students who I think can do more of a challenge? And then to your point, Sean, one of the examples that we shared with our teachers, so in each of our faculty meetings, the principals are doing a little piece on standards-based grading to help bring folks along. One of the examples that we showed in the October faculty meeting is 2 students who did the exact same math worksheet. Both students got all of the multiple choice questions correct. When it came to, then there was a question where they needed to show their work, and then there was a question where they needed to respond, give an extended response. The student who got a 3 answered all of the questions correctly, showed their work on that question, and then answered the word question appropriately. The student who got a 4 on his or her own answered the question where to show your work, but also said, but you could also do it this way, and offered an additional answer. And then in the extended response, gave the appropriate response, and then also said, but you could also divide in this way, and then it would let you know why you got something to begin with. And so the student just clearly knew more and shared more. And was a score, it was a 4, was working above grade level. But giving those opportunities for students, for teachers to give students those accelerated opportunities is an area where we need to work. But teachers now in their classrooms do create scenarios where they need to work with children in small groups, and whether it's taking kiddos who are accelerating or taking kiddos who need remediation, that small group work to try and meet all students where they're at is taking place. Did that answer your question? Okay.
Thanks.
Sure.
Now I have a question from that. So, I'm sorry. I'm struggling with this sounds awesome to me for kids who are getting an unfair grade because of the had to learn it to get up to that point. And so I totally get the why should they be punished because when you first introduced it to them, they got a 1. and then, next week they got a 2, but now they've really figured it out. Like, I'm totally on board with that. That makes 100% sense to me. What I'm stuck with is the kids who get things fast and they excel. And I know a lot of children are very rule-oriented, and if it says to do X, they do X. So how would they know that they could also offer you Y and Z, and therefore demonstrate that they have all this extra proficiency? When are we inviting them to do that? Are we telling them that's something they can do? Because a lot of kids, I think, are very rules and regulations. The question told me to do this, and so I did what the question told me to do. And do they know that they can offer all this additional information and therefore identify themselves as being someone who could maybe be challenged more? Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
It does make sense, and I think it's about the directions that we provide to students, right? So the math examples that we shared literally said show your work. It didn't say show us your work in one way, right? It just said show your work, and the student knew more, so he showed more. And same thing with the written response. It just said write a response that answers such and such question, and students who know more will naturally tell you more anyway. That's no different than students who are creating a research paper, or your student who, when given the guideline to, write an essay of 3 to 5 paragraphs, does the 5, not the 3, But as I said, creating those opportunities for students to earn that is an area that we have identified where teachers are feeling that we need to make sure that we have those opportunities ready to go for students.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. That was your full report, Dr. Kilmer? Wonderful. And I just want to note, just like our acknowledgement and recognition section, which we had earlier, this board really wants to be putting forward all of the great things we're doing. This is the first in a multiple series of presentations that we'll be having about various aspects around the district. And we have specifically asked Dr. Kilmer to work with his team so that the board and the community can learn about all of the things that are going on in our district. So stay tuned for more. But I think it was very appropriate to start with curriculum because that is our main focus. So thank you very much. All right. Next on the agenda, we're to our committee discussions. So Julie, you had something from policy.
Yes, the policy committee did meet, and we just, did we get to that part? Yes, we passed the 2 policies. We had the second read. But most importantly, Dr. Kilmer was able to draft up a new facilities, well, not a new, just kind of worked on what we already had, but something that was more in alignment with our board vision, is that being the board facilities use policies. So it sounds like as soon as that policy goes through administration, the facilities committee will then review it, and then it'll come back to our board, and then it will be implemented.
Great.
So I think that everyone will be really happy with it.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. All right, Sean, you had something
Yeah,
on facilities?
the facility committee, we get together bi-weekly to get updates on the current capital project. So we're in tune with what's going on in each of the buildings, and we get detailed reporting on that. Yesterday, I think it was yesterday, Dr. Kilmer sent out a notification as we started to evaluate where we are in the capital project with funding and balance that's left, and looking at the Layton and high school campus, we really determined that it was critical to get a flow study, a traffic flow study done, because we're looking at all the spaces that we have available, and then we were looking at how they're used in the traffic that goes, whether it be a parking lot or whether it be Buck Boulevard, and where we were going to lay out, take out, what we were going to do. In order to make that determination, we really felt that we had to have a professional group come in and let us know what it looks like for the safety of our students and for the flow of traffic and use of space. So that's going on right now. Once we get that back, then we'll chew on that and see, how we build that into what the rest of our plan will be for the capital project, phase 4.
All right. Appreciate it, Sean. Okay, so we're to the consent agenda. All right, so I'm going to move through this, and I'm going to move A through N. All right, so A through N as presented. Can I have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Julie. Is there
I'll
a second?
second.
Okay, thank you. Tom? Right. All right, any discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Wonderful, motion carries. Next up is curriculum.
This is just our annual mentoring memo so that we are appointing the mentors for our new teachers this year.
Great, thank you. So can I get a motion, please, for the mentoring program as presented?
I'll move.
Thank you, Kristen. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Julie. Any discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries. Personnel.
Good evening, everyone. On personnel, item A, we do have a professional staff retirement, and I'd like to recognize Susan Roik, who has admirably served the students and staff of the Oswego City School District as a math teacher since September 1st, 2006, and her retirement date is March 2nd, 2024. So congratulations to her. So item A, as presented.
Wonderful. Can I have a motion, please?
I'll
make
make
the
a
motion.
motion.
Okay, Julie, I heard you first. A second?
I'll second.
Tom, thank you very much. Any discussion? Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries.
The next group is items B through D, which are professional staff recommendations as presented.
Okay, can I have a motion for B through D, please?
I'll move that.
Thank you, Sean. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Kristen. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody against? All right, motion carries.
Our next group is items E through H, which are support staff recommendations as presented.
Okay, can I have a motion for E through H, please?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Tom. A second? I'll second. Thank you, David. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, motion carries.
And our last grouping is items I through N. And I would like to point out both items J and items K. That is a revision from our last meeting, item J. And item K, excuse me, is a correction on that. And just so for point of reference, that those positions are grant funded. They're either through our ESSER grant or our ARP grant. So that's what those positions are for. So we did make the correction, and it is correct in this board agenda. So items I through N, which are substitutes, temporary positions, extra compensatory positions, extracurricular volunteers, and those are as presented.
Okay, can I get a motion, please?
I'll move.
Thank you, Kristen. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Tom. Any discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, we're to finance. All right, would you, I can do this if you'd like. Sure. Okay, sure, we can do that. We didn't talk ahead of time. Okay, me too. All right, so we have A is a request for budgetary transfer of funds. B is a request for another budget transfer of funds. C is a donation from the Blackbaud Giving Group. D is a donation from Charities Aid Foundation of America, Exelon. E is our agreement for Rachel's Challenge. F is Ulta Material Handling Agreement. G is a memorandum of understanding with Jennifer Vrooman. Oh, God, I keep reading these. I got myself into it. All right. H is the Anderson Center for Autism contract. I is the Construction Association's fee for our Phase 4, which Facilities Committee is working through, Sean mentioned. Oswego High School traffic assessment is J, which Sean also just mentioned. K is our agreement with King & King Architects for an energy performance contract. And L is our agreement, again, with King & King for our school health-based center that we're outfitting in Layton Elementary School. Can I get a motion for A through L, please?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Discussion.
Yeah, I have a concern about I.
Sure.
It's a substantial amount of money, the fee proposal. It's $701,200 for construction associates. I understand that we've worked with them in the past, but I'm concerned about whether or not we're getting competitive bidding and whether or not we would be better served to have opened that up for requests for proposals to make sure that we're getting the best price. Doesn't mean construction associates isn't the best price, but maybe we need to check that before we approve such a substantial contract. And also, if other businesses gave us a lower price, perhaps construction associates, based upon working with us, would like to meet that price so they can keep the work. I'm just not sure that I'm comfortable, at least, approving a fee that significant without seeing some competitive bidding.
Absolutely. Dr. Kilmer, do you have anything to?
So when we're talking about construction management is also about relationships both with understanding the building, understanding the facilities, working with architects, engineers. We've had a pretty significant turnover when you're talking about staffing within the district. I do believe that Construction Associates brings a level of familiarity and understanding of our campus, of its needs, and the work that they have done for us. This is a continuation of the current project. So it is not uncommon for us to see a continuation with a construction management firm in the same project, and then possibly considering an RFP for the next project. But just for your consideration and thought.
So can I make a motion to pull out I from the rest of the items that you just listed off so that we can vote on I separately?
Yeah, absolutely. So accept the motion to split the vote so that I is considered separately. Is there a second? I'll second. Thank you, David. Okay, so now we can have discussion just on the motion of splitting out this. All right, so if there's discussion on that motion. Good enough.
As far as why to split it out?
Yeah, so the idea is, if we're going to split it out, obviously, you want to consider it separately. So the rationale would be, why would we want to hold off on this, approving this in this meeting now?
Yeah, I agree with Kristen. I think there's a lot of companies out there that are also professional that could probably come in, but I'm kind of cautious about just having somebody give us a price, and that's the only price we get, and then going with it. That we know that that's a competitive price.
Any other discussion? I guess my only question is, and this, we may not know the answer to this, it's being presented us to it today. Is there a particular timetable that we know that this decision should be made by? Not that we should make a decision rushed, but that, is there a frame point? You know, and I don't know. Dr. Kilmer, do we know?
So I don't have that information right in front of me, but I can get that for us. So if you would rather table this and I can bring that information back to you, I'm fine to do that as well. I can address that directly with Facilities Committee.
Right. So I guess I've reframed my question. So what I'm hearing is waiting 2 weeks until our next meeting is not going to be a bad thing. We're going to be okay with that. By table.
I don't see any problem with it.
Beautiful. Okay. The next meeting we have.
I think if you look at the proposed budget or schedule from King and King, I don't think it will make a difference.
Okay. All right, so is there any more discussion on splitting of the vote? Okay, so I'll call the vote. All those in favor of splitting out aye? All those in favor?
Aye.
Is there anybody opposed? Okay, it carried unanimously. So now we have two motions on the floor. Let's deal with the original motion, which is everything but I. So we're not dealing with I right now, okay? So all other items, is there any other discussion? Okay, having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, motion carries. Now we're to the split motion considering just I separately. And because it was moved as part of it, now the secondary motions would be, we can move to vote on it, or there could be some kind of motion to table it.
I move we table it for further investigation and regroup at our next board meeting.
Accept the motion, accept the second. Any discussion on the tabling? Actually, I'm sorry. Table's not discussable, not debatable. So there we go. Okay, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. Wonderful. Thank you very much. We're to 13, student representative, Michael.
Hi, good evening, everybody. So I just have a few things to mention quickly. So there is an acknowledgement that I wanted to bring up real quick that wasn't made earlier, and that is that the boys varsity volleyball team did make it to the finals of sectionals this past week against JD. Tomorrow at the high school, there will be a Rachel's Challenge event. This will be during the daytime for all interested students. This is a group and organization that tries to teach empathy and kindness to students throughout the country. And at 6 p.m., there's a community event in the cafeteria where light refreshments will be served, and there will also be another training. And so I spoke with Dr. Hinman, who is the principal of OHS, this morning about things that were happening around the school. And so Dr. Hinman is going to form a principal's cabinet, and this is a monthly group to highlight student voice, share about upcoming events, as well as work on ideas for bettering the high school. And so this is a platform to discuss concerns and areas for improvement with a group of solution-oriented focus that involves students. The first meeting for this committee is November 15th at 2:30 p.m. in room 236. Class officers, student council officers, all advisors for those groups and the administrative team will be present in this initiative and this conversation. And to touch briefly on the waiting policy reaction that happened last week when that email was sent out on Monday, I worked with students to try and explain that, and I recently worked with Dr. Kilmer yesterday and today, and he was very helpful in explaining it. I think he offered a town hall today that we held with a small group of students, but everyone was invited, where they could come and ask questions to him openly. And I think that's a very positive step in the right direction, because a major point of this whole situation was that we wanted to work on bettering our communication, and Dr. Kilmer has already taken great steps to better this with students, and I wanted to commend him for that. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Michael. Items from the board. Do members have items?
I do quickly.
Kristen.
I just want to encourage everybody, if you have not voted already today, to go out and vote. And a reminder that there are propositions on the back of the ballot. One of them having to do with small school or small city school districts and their bonding. I know that there may not be a lot of hotly contested races this year, but I would encourage you to drive down to your local polling station and do cast your vote, because your vote does matter.
Great, thank you, Kristen. Sean? Yep.
I just want to bring up, I know we mentioned the boys volleyball game, but something happened last week, and I appreciate Dr. Kilmer and Cindy, our athletic director, working on this quickly, and I know there were other people involved. But typically, when something happened like a spectator bus in recent years at our high school and our district, we would say no to that. And it was acted upon very quickly and offered to a group of students to go and cheer on the volleyball team at their sectional match. And I think that that's a little bit of an indication of where we're headed and being more student-focused and changing the culture here, specifically at the high school, than what we've done in previous years. So I want to say thank you, and if we could please head in that direction, I think it'd be great for the students.
Great, wonderful, thank you, Sean. Any other items? Okay, so having heard none, there is need for an executive session. There is not need for a vote afterwards. So if I can have a motion for move to executive, please?
So move.
Thank you, Kristen. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Tom. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Have a good evening, everybody.